Yeah. Well, let's speak to some of our seniors, and I hope the audience doesn't mind. And I'm not picking on our seniors at all, but a lot of concerns with people on fixed incomes. We saw what we saw with the market happen. A lot of people lost a lot of money, and some of our seniors now are losing their homes or being faced with a possible foreclosure because of even health care costs, because they can't do both. So someone that's over 62, are they protected any differently, or if they're disabled, is there any special type of protection that we can tell people about that they may not know?
Well, I would, I'll take this one, Mike. Seniors are just like anyone else. Doesn't matter if they're 62
I'm
or
sure they're
24.
glad to hear that. I'm sure they're finally, because we pick on them all the time.
My mother's 73, and she'll tell me if she's listening that I'm going to say she's very young at heart and looking. Okay.
Good.
At any rate, it is a tragedy. That's all I can tell you. It's a perfect storm. We have seniors who are on fixed incomes. A lot of them did not have a strong pension,
right?
Especially now that we're facing that, where they only have Social Security coming in. Their health costs are just, quadrupling.
Yeah.
And a lot of them do have house costs. They may have paid off their mortgage, but with the utilities going way up, it's just, it's just. You
still got to get oil, still got to heat your house, still got to cut the lawn, still got to fix the washer and dryer.
Absolutely. That was what my mom was for, but no, I'm just joking. At any rate, no, really. Seniors it's really a tragic state for them. So a lot of seniors I've saw in my practice is that they have used their credit cards to pay for their prescriptions. Mm-hmm. And they just, maybe not. The other problem we face is that younger family members are not taking care of seniors like they used to.
Right.
So if they're dealing with a lot of expenses, they have a lot of credit card debt, it is one of those things where they may want to consider a bankruptcy so they don't have to deal with the phone calls. And the last thing you need when you're 70 or 80 is a bunch of phone calls coming after you.
Well, at what point, for any of our seniors that are listening, or for some of the adult kids that have parents that might fit the situation, at what point do they entertain that, though? How do you know? How does this senior sitting at home listening to us now know that now is a time for them maybe to seek out some advice, whether it's through you or someone else, to entertain the idea of helping get themselves caught up?
If they have any credit card debt, any whatsoever, and they're facing monthly payments, and all their Social Security check is going out to those payments, the minimum payments, they need help.
Yeah.
If they are behind on their utilities, they should seek help. Again, that's why I recommend a debt attorney, not necessarily a bankruptcy attorney, because they can help them walk them through the options that they might have. There are some programs out there, but they're very difficult to, go through. It takes a long time, so they should get advice as soon as they are finding themselves struggling with paying just the minimum payments.
Now, how about this Homestead Act? Does that have any way of protecting seniors if that's in play?
It can. The homestead, it must be filed. In Massachusetts, you definitely have to file. Some other states, you don't have to necessarily file them, but they have to make sure that's filed. It can up to a limit. Mm-hmm. If their house is fully, clear of any liens whatsoever, they're not at risk necessarily for judgments from these creditors if they can't pay and they start coming after them. But it all depends. It depends on the situation. So that's why I recommend, if they have any questions whatsoever, they should come into a consumer debt attorney and look what their options are.
Now, we spoke at Chapter 7, Chapter 13, we have Chapter 29, we have all these chapters. And I think that part of the concern is our confusion as ordinary consumers. At some point, we shut down. We really did. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's when we decided to get disorderly. We'd already been drunk. But in trying to understand a lot of these pieces are very, very difficult. Now, you spoke about Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. What about Chapter 11? How does that affect people personally?
Well, Chapter 11 is more of a corporate reorganization. It's similar to a Chapter 13, but the difference is it's for either a company who is registered as a corporation or as an individual who has so much secured debt that they just can't get into a Chapter 13. And the figure right now is if you have over $1,010,000 in secured debt. So conceivably, you're working hard, you work all your life, and maybe you buy 2 or 3 investment properties. But you want to make sure that everything's leveraged properly. You still have some liens on those. and you find out, my gosh, you know what, I've got $1.5 million in mortgages. My properties are underwater now. I've got no equity, less negative equity. I want to get into a bankruptcy because I need to protect myself. I've missed a few payments. I got to stop these foreclosures. I go and I file the Chapter 13, and I find out I can't do that.
Yeah.
I have to get into a Chapter 11. The problem with a Chapter 11 is it's so very complicated. It's not something where an average person can go in on their own. There
Right.
are a whole lot
So
of
typically, that's not something that us average Joes would do necessarily.
Well, it's not something that the average person would do, short of someone who has some investment property,
Right.
I would suggest.
Right. So let's go back to the loan modification for a minute, because I think that if anything, that's the untapped market, and I only mean it to the extent that many people may not know about it. They may have heard about it. They may have heard there were some bad things said about it. But tell us some things that we should know that you find that, first of all, is not getting out to the general public, but maybe also some of the misconceptions that we can address, so people aren't, sometimes how it is when you hear something that you think is bad,
Yeah.
you just take that as bad, you never even research it, you never even go any further. That's one of the things that I hope that we continue not to do, is because with everything that's bad, there's got to be something good, and that way we can properly measure it and say, okay, is this for me or is it not? So let's talk about loan modifications.
First things first. You today, as a consumer, and you have a home you
Yeah.
want to keep, and you have debt, and you have the economy, and you have job issues and so forth, you have to start thinking of yourself as a boxer. You have to go rounds.
Yeah.
And things are not going to be fixed immediately. Your expectations shouldn't be, well, I submitted some paperwork to the mortgage, they should come back and give me $1,000 payment. It's not going to happen.
So you're saying that we need to slow ourselves down, period, first of all.
Absolutely. You got to slow yourself. I mean, fear. Listen, I understand. I see it all the time. If you're falling behind your mortgage, you've got 2 kids, your job.
And you're hearing foreclosures are up, and people out the tent cities are being built.
And you're getting those nasty letters
The
from
phone
them.
calls
Yeah,
at dinner time.
Absolutely. Fear gets to us. But you have to hunker in and say, okay, I got to get a game plan. And your expectation should be that it may not happen immediately.
Yeah.
It's a long process, but I can tell you at the end of the tunnel, it can be very beneficial to
Yeah.
you. The things that they have to know for a fact is that it doesn't happen overnight. 2, it can be a long process. You must continue to call the mortgage company because
Yeah.
they are as overwhelmed as you are.
Right.
Believe it or not,
Yeah.
they
And
sometimes
a lot of those people are just there doing their jobs, honestly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I speak to them on a daily basis, and a lot of times they're like, oh, for 6 to 12 months, I'm really sorry. We
Yeah.
just are they're not hiring anybody because guess what? If you're not paying mortgages,
Right.
mortgage companies don't have the money to hire other
Right.
people.
Right.
So hang in there.
Yeah.
That's one thing. You will hear these nightmares from other consumers who have tried that, but they need to stick in there.
Yeah.
And they
So
need
walk
to
us
be
through
diligent.
walk us through the process of a loan modification for anyone out there that might have entertained it, but or thinking about it, and they might not understand it. Can you walk us quickly through it, maybe basically, so that way we at least get a good feel?
Sure. The first step is every mortgage company has a website. There are 2 things you want to know. There's a modification process, and there's the HAMP program. Not every mortgage company has, in fact, submitted to the HAMP program, but you should check that out.
The what
before.
program?
The HAMP program.
HAMP?
Yes.
The Home Affordable Modification Program.
Okay, I thought you were saying hemp at first.
Oh, well.
So that's not what it is, right?
No.
Well, I was trying to make people happy
Yeah,
here,
well,
right?
you made me happy. I perked up. I'm like, hemp? Where?
I know, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's funny. I'm glad he said it all. That's great. I'm just here to make everybody happy. But you should check your website, the website of the mortgage company that you have your
Yeah.
mortgage with. That's one. They should have a list of documents you need to get together, as I'd say. And generally, just an overview, generally it's usually tax forms, pay stubs, bank statements,
Yeah.
a letter of hardship.
Almost like getting a regular mortgage?
Almost like getting a regular mortgage, very
More
similar.
difficult or not?
It's a lot more difficult.
Stringent only because obviously they know if you're coming to them it's because you have problems.
Exactly, and also they have no obligation to help you.
Yeah.
There's none, except under some circumstances of the HAMP
Doesn't
program.
this suck?
It
I'll say it. It really does. This has got to be bad for you guys because I mean, you're seeing people right now that, as you said, there's fear involved. People are very embarrassed. No one wants to admit that we're having financial problems. This has got to be hard for you guys.
It does. It really. It's hard for me to see anyone who has worked really, really hard
Yeah.
to get to where they're at, and usually this hardship has